Once upon a time, there lived a young woman whose name was Titi. She was only 22 years old. However, she was convinced that she had everything in life all figured out. No matter how many times her mother warned her about the dangers of the city, Titi never listened. Rather, she went on to do the things that her mother had warned her about. Titi believed that she was an adult, capable of making her own decisions. Although this was true to an extent, Titi had a way of making careless decisions that got her into so much trouble. One Friday evening, whilst her mother was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Titi received a text message from her friend Hana about a big party happening that night. It was a very big party where the high and mighty in the state would all be in attendance, and Titi could not miss such an event. She rushed into her room and slipped into a short dress, not caring that the party was at night. Her mother had warned her several times not to go out at night, but Titi, being the stubborn girl that she was, paid no mind to her mother's warnings. She snuck out of the house, trying to avoid any form of confrontation with her mother. Her friend Hannah called her repeatedly on the phone, revealing that the party was about to begin. Titi, filled with so much tension, decided to grab a taxi by the roadside. She could not miss out on this party, knowing the caliber of people that would be in attendance. So, she got into the taxi and headed straight for the venue. A few minutes later, Titi realized that the driver was going in a different direction. She tried to get his attention, but the driver ignored her completely and began to accelerate at a ridiculous speed. Titi screamed at the top of her voice, calling for help, but the driver increased the volume of his music. She watched as the blaring music drowned out her cries. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reached out for her phone to make a call. But before she could dial a number, the driver reached back and snatched the phone from her hands. "Sit still and don't make a sound," the driver said angrily, his voice sending chills down her spine. Her stomach clenched in fear as she watched her life flash before her eyes. She realized in that moment that she had made the worst mistake of her life. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, but her stubbornness had pushed her into the trouble that she now found herself in. Titi looked out of the window and noticed that they were on a very lonely road. Panic surged through her veins as she pushed open the car door and jumped out of the moving vehicle, hitting the ground hard as she rolled over the rough gravel, pain shooting through her entire body. The moment she stopped rolling, she forced herself up despite the stinging pain in her knees and elbows. Her short dress was torn, and blood trickled down her leg as she leaned against the road. The driver slammed on the brakes of his car and cursed loudly. Titi did not wait to see what he would do next. She picked herself up from the ground and began to run as fast as her legs could carry her. After a few minutes, she ran into a young woman who had stopped her car to give her a lift. Her name was Damola, the daughter of a very wealthy politician who was returning home from a meeting when she caught sight of Titi walking alone on the lonely road. "Where are you going all alone?" she asked. Titi narrated the entire story to her. Damola was so bitter to hear what had happened that she rushed Titi to the hospital, seeing all the bruises that she had sustained from the fall. At the hospital, Titi was treated for her injuries, and Damola stayed by her side the entire time. Titi was so grateful to Damola for saving her life when she had no one else to turn to. From that moment on, they became best of friends. Damola introduced Titi to her glamorous world of wealth and influence. She took her to exclusive parties, introduced her to rich and powerful people, and showered her with expensive gifts. Titi was in awe of Damola's lifestyle and desperately wanted to belong. However, her mother was not pleased. "I don't like that girl," her mother said one evening as Theo got ready for another outing. "There's something about her that doesn't sit right with me. Stay away from her." Titi scoffed. "Mama, you always find a way to hate on my friends. Just because you've never been around real power in your life does not mean that you should sabotage my own chances. Damola is the only bridge that we have to actual wealth, and instead of your usual bitterness, you should be thanking her for this privilege." Her mother was shattered by her daughter's words, but she swallowed her pain in silence. All she could do was lift her eyes to the heavens and pray that Titi would not have to bleed before learning the truth. Days passed, and Damola invited Titi to her house. It was a grand mansion, bigger than anything Titi had ever seen in her life. "Wow," Titi gasped, taking in the marble floors, the gold-trimmed furniture, and the sparkling chandeliers. "Your house is like a palace," she said to Damola. Damola laughed. "This is just one of our mansions," she replied. Titi could not believe her ears. She wanted this kind of life, a life filled with luxury and power, where she could afford whatever she wanted. They arrived at Damola's room, and Titi could not hold back her shock. Damola had hundreds of wigs lined up in her bedroom, expensive wigs that Titi could only dream of owning. Damola reached out for one of the wigs and presented it to Titi, whose eyes widened in disbelief as she held the wig in her hands. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, soft, silky, and luxurious. Damola convinced her to try it on, and Titi slipped the wig onto her head excitedly. She looked at herself in the mirror and could not believe how beautiful she looked. Titi, in that moment, could not help but imagine how beautiful life would be in Damola's shoes. She turned back to look at Damola, who informed her that the wig was now hers. "It's all yours," she said to Titi, who froze in shock, realizing how expensive the wig was. Titi had never received such an expensive gift before. She wanted to refuse it, but Damola insisted that she keep it. Hours later, Titi arrived home with the wig in her hand. Her mother, upon seeing it, asked where she got the wig from. Titi revealed that it was a gift from Damola. Titi's mother was furious to hear this. Her best friend, Hannah, tried to calm her down, but Titi's mother yelled angrily at Titi, demanding that the wig be returned. But Titi ignored her mother and walked into her room, shutting the door behind her. She could not understand why her mother hated Damola so much, despite all the wonderful things Damola had done for her. That night, Titi went to bed with a smile on her face. She had never felt so important before. She carefully hung the wig in her room as she drifted off to sleep, thinking about the mansions and the life of luxury that she so desperately yearned for. However, somewhere around 2 in the morning, Titi was awoken by a terrifying itch on her scalp. At first, she tried to ignore it, scratching lazily as she reached for her phone, but the itch became unbearable, like tiny needles pricking her all over her head. She groaned aloud and sat up fully, scratching aggressively as she wondered what could be the cause of such a terrifying itch. Then she felt it. Something squished between her fingernails. Titi brought her hand down and looked. Lo and behold, maggots were stuck between her fingers. Tiny, white maggots were wriggling in and out of her scalp. Tiu screamed out in terror. Her mother, who was already fast asleep, jumped out of bed and rushed to her room. "What is it?" she asked. Titi's hands shook in terror as she pointed at her hair. Her mother gasped as she saw the maggots crawling through her daughter's scalp. "Blood of Jesus!" she cried as she grabbed a scarf and tried to wipe the maggots away from her daughter's head. Titi could feel her world collapse before her eyes. The more they tried to get rid of the maggots, the more maggots oozed out of her scalp. Her mother screamed out for help, and soon neighbors gathered, watching in horror as Titi pleaded for someone to save her. She was rushed to several hospitals, but there was no medical explanation for her condition. Nothing they did was able to kill or stop the maggots from growing. Her once beautiful face became swollen, and her eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. Titi's mother, overwhelmed with grief and desperation, finally decided to take a bold step. "We are going to church," she said firmly to Titi, whose scalp was now covered with maggots. "God will heal you, my daughter. We need to go to him for healing." Titi snapped her head up, her face filled with intense anger. "No, Mama, no church. All they want is offering and tithes. Prayers for healing that come with envelopes and seed sowing. If money is what they want, let them heal themselves first." Her mother gasped at her words, but Titi was not willing to listen. She had lost hope in churches. To her, none of them could help her. She wanted results, not long services and empty promises. Later that day, her mother's best friend, Auntie Key and Hannah, came visiting. After seeing the state Titi was in, Auntie Key suggested that they go see a spiritualist who was known for her great powers. "I've seen her do great things that doctors and pastors couldn't," Hannah said to Titi's mother, who was blatantly against the idea. "We are not interested in seeing a spiritualist," Titi's mother said to her best friend, Hannah. When Titi interrupted her, saying that she would go, "Anything is better than this pain, Mama. If you won't take me, I'll go by myself," she said to her mother, who tried to convince her that such places often brought more harm than good. Titi, desperate for instant healing, insisted on going. She followed her mother's friend, Auntie Key, who took her to Aya Abba, a powerful spiritualist who lived out of town. Her hut was surrounded by herbs, skulls of animals, and strange drawings that sent shivers down Titi's spine. Yet, there was something strange about her presence. Yaba studied Titi in silence. She then told her to sit before a large bowl of water. "You have been touched by unclean hands," Yaba said, revealing that the wig carried evil spirits sent to suck out her destiny to enrich another. Yaba revealed to Titi that she was used for money rituals. Damola was no ordinary friend. Her father used her to lure young girls who were then used for rituals. Yaba, after revealing this, handed Titi a calabash filled with crushed herbs and water, instructing her to wash her head in the water. "When you are done, I will keep the water here in my sanctuary for 3 days. During that time, you must not speak a single word, not to me, not to your mother, not even in prayer," Yaba said. Titi looked at her, confused. "You mean I can't speak to anyone for 3 days?" she asked. Yaba revealed to her that silence was the sacrifice. "If your lips move, your healing will vanish," she said. Titi nodded in fear. She washed her hair in the bowl, wincing at the stink of the herbs on her wounded scalp. After the ritual, Yaba whispered a blessing over the bowl and took it inside. Titi, still trembling in fear, walked out of the strange house with her Auntie Ki. As they approached the car, a little girl, no older than 8 years old, stood by the footpath leading outside the spiritualist's house. She approached Titi, who was now lost in her own thoughts. "Sister," the little girl said in a gentle voice, "please, can I talk to you?" Titi's heart pounded. Her lips parted slightly to respond, but she quickly remembered the stern warning Yaba had given her. Titi clenched her mouth shut and took a step back. The girl reached out again, pleading for just a word. Titi took another step backward, her eyes wide with fear. She looked at Auntie Ki, who immediately stepped forward, shielding Titi with her arm. "Go away, you demon," Auntie Ki said to the little girl, who hugged Titi tightly and walked away. When Titi arrived home, she didn't speak to her mother or anyone else. She locked herself in her room, crying bitterly as she felt the worms crawling in her hair. She did not speak, not even when her mother knocked on her door to pray for her. The silence felt like both punishment and prison, but she endured it because she wanted to be free from the pain that had stolen her peace. That night, as Titi lay down to sleep, she had a dream that terrified her greatly. She saw a strange woman chasing her with a knife. She woke up, terrified, drenched in her own sweat. She sat on her bed, panting heavily as her hands trembled. The image of the woman with the knife refused to leave her mind. Titi could feel her heartbeat quicken. She stood up from her bed and reached for her scarf to cover her scalp. As she reached into the pocket of her dress, she felt a soft piece of paper. With shaking hands, she pulled it out. It was a small, wrinkled note, neatly folded in her pocket. Titi stared at the note, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't remember placing anything in her pocket. She opened it slowly and began to read. "Damola is innocent." The note read, "She never wanted to hurt you. Auntie Ki, your mother's friend, is the one behind it all. She paid the taxi man to kidnap you on that fateful night. She also made the maggots come out of your head to make you believe it was the wig. She even went further to pay a visit to Damola to inform her that you were cursed, so that she would stay away from you. Auntie Ki is not a friend. She wants to ruin your life completely because of her jealousy. Please be careful." Titi felt goosebumps on her body. She wondered who could have left the note in her pocket when suddenly, her mind went back to the little girl who had tried to speak to her earlier. It all began to make sense, the way Auntie Ki insisted on taking her to the spiritualist, the way she shouted at the little girl, and now, the dream. Titi could not believe it. She had blamed Damola, believing that she was the one behind all that was happening to her. She sat on her bed, clutching the note in her hand as she sobbed uncontrollably. She had pushed away the one person who had truly cared for her and kept her enemy close. When morning came, Titi broke her silence. She told her mother about the note, and her mother broke down in tears, regretting all her actions toward Damola. A while ago, Titi's mother had a dream where she saw an evil being forcing a wig on her daughter's head. So, when Damola gifted her daughter the wig, she concluded that Damola was evil, not knowing that it was her friend Ki who, through diabolical means, cursed her daughter to make them suffer. Titi, in that moment, pleaded with her mother to take her to a church. Without wasting any time, her mother agreed, and took her to a church, which was a short distance from their home. The pastor, after listening to their story, stretched out his hand and began to pray for Titi, who felt an instant relief from the worms that had tormented her for weeks. However, far away from the church, in Auntie Key's house, something terrible happened. Auntie Key, who had been peacefully sipping her tea in her living room, suddenly dropped the cup and screamed out in pain. She stumbled to the mirror, and to her horror, she saw maggots pouring out of her scalp just like they had once done to Titi. "No! No!" she screamed, slapping her head wildly. Her neighbors rushed in, only to find her rolling on the floor, scratching, screaming, and begging for help as the worms burrowed deeper into her skin. It was clear that the evil had backfired. Titi received her healing, while Auntie Key suffered the consequences of her evil. From that day on, Titi learned to listen to her mother, who had always tried to protect her, even when she didn't understand why. She tried to reach out to Damilola, who she was told had left the country for her education. Titi spent years healing. She became more prayerful, more discerning, and more grounded. She no longer sought validation in luxury or attention. She now knew the dangers of jumping to hasty conclusions. Auntie Key was never seen again. Some said she was taken to a mental institution. Others believed her condition could not be cured, as the spiritual worms never stopped eating into her mind. It was as though everything she had planned for Titi had returned to her sevenfold. As for Titi, her story became a warning to all girls in the community to be careful of the people they trust, and to remember that sometimes the devil wears a friendly face. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we must listen to the wise counsel of those who genuinely care for us, especially our parents, as their warnings often come from a place of love and protection. Desperation should never lead us to seek help from ungodly or harmful places, and discernment is essential in recognizing true intentions. Above all, humility, prayer, and obedience can lead to healing, while pride and stubbornness can open doors to destruction. I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. See you in the next video.